And we're live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Love First Christians Bible Study. I am Hody Johns. I'm here with Ben Williams. Ben, how are you
Hey,
doing today?
everybody. I'm doing good, doing good. Had a good date with my wife.
Mm.
So, yeah, we haven't had a date in a while. So, kind of important.
Date's good. You got kids. So, I mean,
Yeah,
I always find that dating with the kiddos, I got to tell you, it's
it's a challenge.
it's a challenge. You gotta work for it. And more than just like, I think a lot of people say, oh, we got to work for it. But you got to really work for it with,
Well, our situation's even more complicated
yeah.
because I have chronic illness. She has chronic illness, so it's very hard to. She's got something similar to cystic fibrosis, so she's
Mm.
down a lot. So it's hard to when she's stable and safe, and but we figure it out. We're learning it. We're figuring it out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you guys both, I think I love your story about how you both kind of have, health problems. And
Yeah.
and that is certainly something that I think really gets to your soul. When we talk about the soul, people think about the spirit, but the soul is the combination of body and spirit. And so it's hard when, a lot of people were used to talk about their spirits being out of whack. But when your body's out of whack, it's hard to get your whole soul right. It's hard to
Yes.
get everything normal. And it's funny because I think some people are like, oh, it's just a cold, get over it. But I think everybody, even if it's just a cold, aren't you a little more irritable than you should be? Aren't you a little more,
Yeah, I mean, most
impatient?
people
Like,
are.
right. I mean, it's, and so when you guys have something like the seriousness of the things that you guys both deal with and the chronic nature of them,
Well, like a common cold will put my wife in the hospital most of the time.
yeah.
Give you an idea. Yeah.
Yeah, with like what you guys are dealing with, just how hard it is, how much you have to overcome to get your soul at peace. So I appreciate you being willing to talk with us and put other people's soul at peace as well, in addition to your own. Let's see here. Are there any Bible verses that you wanted to talk about this week that
No,
I want to make sure
I,
I
I
didn't miss?
I've
Okay.
been enjoying reading your discussion, your ones you've been bringing up.
Yeah, I got small little snippets. I highlight. I always appreciate. I guess Aaron's going to be here in a few. I appreciate Aaron because he usually comes in with
He
the.
does. He comes loaded, man.
He comes loaded, and he comes loaded with the Bible verse that I kind of least look forward to talking about usually because I'm just like, oh man, this one's difficult to explain. It's unfortunate, and he's right to do it. I think we get a lot of good, interesting things out of exploring
Yeah.
complicated verses that there's a lot of Bible verses where there's not universal understanding about them, and I think it's good that Aaron's really good at sniffing those out and he's be like, what the heck does this mean? I didn't really understand that. And I'm like, oh man, I'm not sure I understand either. Why did Jesus put the demons in the pigs? That's a complicated answer. It's a complicated answer.
Is
But
there really an answer?
yeah.
Honestly.
There is I am sure that there is a truth to it, but it's one that eludes me. And so I allow the
There's
Holy
theories.
Spirit to, yeah. Yeah, there's theories. There's ones that resonate with me better than others, to be sure. But there's just things like that. Anyhow, we got some people viewing here, so I can stop theorizing about what Aaron might bring up and actually start bringing some stuff up here. Now, I do have several verses that I typed about that I'm going to skip, and only because they will be more important later. I talked about what's going on in Ephesus and
Right.
Thessalonica. We get a taste of that in Acts, but obviously we get the epistles to them where we will talk more deeply about what's going on in Thessalonica and what's going on in Ephesus. There are epistles dedicated to those, and so I'll skip those just for the sake of time because you and I can take the whole thing, all 2 hours of just talking about Bible verses. So I'll save
How did we
those.
do that last time? I'm telling you, we didn't even.
The time before that made sense because we got on forgiveness, and that took
Yeah.
almost like a full hour just talking about that as a concept. But last time we were just talking, and then all of a sudden 2 hours goes by. It's
We didn't even get to politics.
no, I know. Shoot, darn it! I hate it when we miss talking about politics.
I mean, we got to at least talk about P. Diddy. I mean, come on.
That's true. P. Diddy and Alligator Alcatraz are the two on my radar. Certainly
Oh my
gotta.
gosh, both of them just making me sick. But There's a lot about the P. Diddy one that is sobering. I won't be able to stay for that part, unfortunately, because I promised my daughter I'd put her to bed after I get out of at 9, but
No problem. No problem.
9-ish, 9-ish.
Yeah, we usually only get you for an hour, so I appreciate that first hour. You know what? If we finish the Bible verses in time, maybe I'll have you, especially since you have thoughts about it. I'd like to get that at least before you leave. So
Okay.
let's get through this. We'll see what happens here. All right, so I had one here, just a quote. This is from Psalms. The Lord helps the fallen and lifts those bent beneath their loads. The eyes of all look to you in hope. You give them their food as they need it. When you open your hand, you satisfy the hunger and thirst of every living thing. Now, I quoted this one because there's a lot of pushback whenever we talk about giving away food. And it usually comes in the form of give a man a fish, teach a man to fish. Oh, aren't you making them comfortable in their poverty versus giving them the skills they need to succeed, whatever. And this verse, as well as, let's be honest, Jesus' life, was very just have food. If you are hungry, here is food. Whether conversion isn't even a thought, right? I mean, obviously, Jesus wants people to convert. And so I guess you could argue that that is primarily what he's doing it, but he's doing that by feeding, not by talking, and hoping that when people get food and you're not. I had a friend, so I did a prison outreach. I was with, this was not a Christian thing. Well, I guess it kind of was, but you know, anytime you do an outreach, but I was doing a prison outreach and I was doing it with the Weird Libertarians Network. And they were like, I was like, man, should we get like flyers? Should I get like banners? Should I put it on the plates? Should I whatever? And the editor, Chris Spangle, is a really good dude, worth a follow on social media, Christian Liberty guy, really insightful. He's on the Miss Pat, both the podcast and the show on TV. He's one of the jurors. He's White Boy Chris. And so he's on BET. He's and very accessible, really cool guy. Anyway, his advice was like, man, just do it. And if you don't advertise, that will make them all the more go, what is going on? Maybe I should ask him something about why this is happening. And absolutely, having tried both methods, at least for me, like when I was not advertising anything, people were constantly wondering why I was doing what I was doing. If I advertised on everything, people are like, right, this is their little outreach, whatever, I get it. And so there's a lot that we give. I think it's St. Francis of Assisi who is quoted as saying this, but talk about God often, use his name little, but just doing the work. And people will come to you to be like, man, why did you do that for us, right? Why did you choose to do this on your own if there's no big organization behind you? What's going on? Now, I don't want to sucker punch people either. I'm not like, because I think that this also gets into the why we're doing it as well. I don't want to like secretly hide that there is an organization behind it and be like, guess what? Here it is. I want that to be genuine. I want them fed. And I'm just being like, well, why did I want you fed? Well, because, you know, liberty, God, whatever I want to say, all that stuff. And I want all that to be true. I want it to be a genuine interaction. I'm using a lot of words just to say that we really should be just giving to people without expecting that they return everything and anything that we give, without expecting that they listen. People that are full are more likely to learn to fish than people who are starving. You know, the drowning man is clutching at a straw. If somebody's clutching at straws, they're not clutching onto a fishing rod. They're reaching out for the nearest thing and trying to grab at it. And if we get them healthy first, they're in a better place for them to learn those lessons. This is when Jesus is meeting needs. He's doing the Lord's work, you know, he's meeting their needs. They'll come to God with their needs met, right? If we're in a healthy place, you're more likely to make healthy decisions. So let's get them fed. Let's get them slept. Let's get them rested. Let's get their, you know, bank loans paid off, whatever. Let's get them in the right place. And when they're in the right place, they're going to find their way to the right place. They're going to use better judgment. And so we just I mean, it says the hunger and thirst of every living thing, not even just people. Every living thing that's hungry and thirsty, God feeds. So we're not withholding anything to try and like be like, oh, did they really learn a lesson this time? Let's just feed everybody, right? Like this, let's not make this harder on ourselves than it has to be. There's a lot of excuses to not do charity. We're tired, we're busy, we don't have the money. I mean, some even good excuses to not do charity. But let's get this thing out of our way that like maybe God wants us to withhold charity for some reason. He didn't withhold it here on earth. He doesn't withhold it as God in the sky, right? As an omnipotent being, he doesn't withhold it. Takes care of every living thing. I think we can go ahead and adopt that policy. Ben, how do you feel about all that?
So I'm still working on a balance in my life because I was raised in you hear me reference that a lot. I was raised under I use that term a lot, but I was raised in this world where it was you was taught you don't work, you don't eat. And so we were very judgmental of people, and we were in that society, teach them how to go get their own fish, we don't need to give them give them fish, teach them how. But you made a good point. That's something I've been pondering is what if they don't even have the strength to even fish? Because there's one thing I've learned, being disabled and having my struggles and then the financial part. There's one thing I've learned is that being poor is very expensive. Being poor is once you go into a cycle of being financially um poor or needy, it's very difficult to and almost next to impossible to get out of that cycle. It's not, and most people live in nepotism and they don't even understand it. But once you're in it, you discover it's a whole different reality, a whole different world. You know, give an example. I don't know if this is going to be like a political example. Maybe I don't know. I'll tell me what you think. But I didn't realize that when you get put on disability or you get on Social Security, that you get approved for Medicare. Now, before I got approved for Medicare, I was on Medicaid. Medicaid covered 100% of all my medical bills. 100%, everything was covered. And I had no deductibles, I had no payment or anything. But once I got approved for disability and I got switched to Medicare, all of a sudden I had $180 a month payment plus it's 80/20. And I had no so you go to 80/20 and then plus with a $5,000 deductible. And I did not realize what older folks are going through just to survive. I mean, just to be I had no clue because it never affected me. But now that it's affecting me, all of a sudden I'm having a different understanding of it. The old saying, you walk in someone's shoes for a while and you suddenly, just walk in their shoes. And so all of a sudden I realize why I see elderly people, just barely having anything in their food cart. And you see them, you see people lined up at the food banks, and a lot of them are older people. And I get it now because once they get on Medicare and they get on Social Security, it is they still have to pay their taxes. They still have to pay taxes on their home. Now they don't get taxed on their Social Security, but it's very difficult to survive. Now, I don't know how to intertwine that into what you're saying, but the point is we don't know what people are going through, and it's so easy to be judgmental. I know there's a struggle, there's a balance, and this is where I struggle personally. What about the balance of able-bodied individuals that could be working and are just lazy? But I honestly don't know the answer to it yet. I just don't. But wouldn't it be better to err on the side of caution than it would be to have someone suffer, you know?
Yeah, I think if they're lazy, let God deal with that, right? Like, I mean, vengeance is mine, right? If we let God in the in the parable of the prodigal son, prodigal for those who are listening and may have not have heard this. Prodigal just means bad with money. So the parable of prodigal son, the father knows the kid's bad with money. The guy goes out. What happens when he's bad with money? He suffers the natural consequences of his actions. Now, he's still got a home to go to afterwards. He's still got food. He's still the father's son, right? Like none of that changes. If the guy is lazy, yeah, he goes out, he's going to suffer. You suffer for being lazy in life, right? Like it's not like just food and shelter or everything, like obviously that there's a lot that this person's not going to have because of that. But we shouldn't be worried about vengeance. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. That's from the scriptures. God's going to take care of sin. God's got the consequence for sin. Our job is not to be the consequence. Our job is to be the father in the parable. Right, that place that the son can always come back home to. I think it's well spoken, and I'll go ahead. I'm going to skip ahead because this touches on Acts. We kind of got a little lucky that this week Psalms was all about. These were a series of Psalms that were written as they were rebuilding Jerusalem, and they were welcoming the exiles back in. And David was looking at their state, the condition that they were in, and how they had lost their will to live. Many of them, they weren't, they felt unwelcome, they felt put upon. And so what you're talking about with just being poor, the expenses of being poor, he saw this firsthand, right? Like how difficult that was on them. And there was a story this week. Sorry, I said I was going to get to the Bible, but I have to share this, that there are like two people who have the gold McDonald's card, which is free McDonald's anywhere you go. And it's like Bill Gates and somebody else or whatever. And it's like, they're getting McDonald's for free. They're the people who least need the gold card.
I never understood that. It just blows my mind. Yeah, right? It blows my ever-loving mind. Yeah.
I don't think Bill Gates, like Visa's getting turned down anytime soon. Look, if you need a place to stay, and you are rich, you will find a place to stay, even if you don't pay for it, right? You've got affluence, you've got connections, you've got favors, you've got people connected to you. There was this guy who attempted this experiment. Boy, I wish Aaron was here for this because we talked about it, but he'll like that I brought this up anyway. But there is a guy, and his story was, he was like, I'm going to start with literally nothing. I'm going to try to make, like, he was like a millionaire, and he's like, I'm going to make, I forget what his goal was, but it was like, I'm going to make $100,000 in a year or something like that, starting with literally nothing. First of all, he failed. So I want to bring that up. He actually gave up this experiment partway through it. But his first order of business was just having a friend who had an RV and was like, hey, I'll make this up to you when I like earn my money back. Mind if I just crash at your place? And the guy was like, oh, of course, you're a rich dude, you're connected, sure, right? Like, so this guy, like, with your affluence, you've got all these connections, you're paying for, you're paying less. Everybody knows a mortgage is cheaper than rent, right? So, and that's putting it on baseline. But as we get further away from like the middle class that is like kind of on the cusp between rent and ownership, when you get poorer, that housing becomes more expensive. And as you get richer, that housing becomes less excessive. It's just so regressive. Go ahead and with any further thoughts on that, because I actually still need to, I'm struggling to find the verse that I wanted from Psalms here.
Well, I had, where do you start? You like, for instance, with me, when I got sick, my business went under. It's a long, sad story, but my business went under, and I ended up being significant debt because of it. All of a sudden, my insurance, and just giving personal examples, my car insurance doubled because I took a hit on my credit score because of the debt. No accidents, perfect driving record. It's just strictly because my credit rating dropped. And I called up and I, why are you doing this to me? I've been with you guys for 10 years. And they're like, it's totally based on the numbers on the credit scores now. And it doesn't matter. You will get doubled. And so now I pay quite a bit more for insurance as a penalty, even though I've got a perfect driving record, no accidents, nothing. And it's just everywhere way I turn around, I've noticed that you pay higher interest rate, you pay higher fees. It's just, having been on both sides of it, I have a different perspective than I've ever had in my entire life.
Yeah, there's okay. I'm gonna quote a couple Bible verses because then they're not going to fit. But it is, again, these are both in Psalms. The Lord is rebuilding Jerusalem and bringing the exiles back to Israel. He heals the brokenhearted and bandages their wounds. And then the other one from, let's see here. The Lord helps the fall. Oh no, that's the one that I quoted already. Hang on. Oh, here it is. He gives justice to the oppressed and food to the hungry. The Lord frees the prisoners. The Lord opens the eyes of the blind. The Lord lifts up those who are weighted down. The Lord loves the godly. The Lord protects the foreigners among us. He cares for the orphans and widows, but he frustrates the plans of the wicked. So you're in a loop here, and there's a reason why we're called to be like God, because of course God, as the creator of this universe, is aware that this was going to happen, that the rich are going to get richer. It's easy.
Poorer.
And the poor get poorer, right? This is natural, right? Like when you have less to invest, you make less. That is just a natural thing. When you have more, you make more. That is just part of this world. And so we are called to frustrate the nature of this world, the natural order of things, of watching these rich get richer and the poor get poorer, that we're called to free these prisoners and these widows. And it takes so much work, like you mentioned. I find that one of the most frustrating things, and maybe this even touches on the Diddy stuff a little bit, but how frustrating it is to watch somebody commit a crime that I know that if I were to commit it, or somebody poorer than me were to commit it, they would be going to jail for a long time.
Well, the rest of their life.
Right. But if it's a politician or a celebrity or something like that, it's just like they find a way to make it go away. And so I was reading, I was watching the documentary Shiny Happy People. You and I have talked about this a little bit. You came from what's the guy's name?
Bill Gothard.
A Gothard inspired sect. Of, I guess, what we'll loosely call Christianity, but that he's got he's got his thing going on, and that all these people were just so, when their son molested their daughter, they knew the police officer to go to that wasn't going to file the charges, because it turned out he himself was also a pedophile or whatever, distributing child porn or whatever. Right. They knew the media outlet to go to. They knew who to contact at Fox. They knew they had a governor in their pocket. Mike Huckabee stepped up for him, was like, you guys don't know these people. Like, this kid is a really good kid, right? Like, these are really good people. I know him better than you do, right? They knew exactly where to go to. They knew the judges to contact. They knew everywhere to go to. We looked at like Ahmaud Arbery, and I remember if we didn't have that videotape, right? Like, those guys absolutely would have got away with what they got away with. And how many people lied about what happened in order to cover for this murder, right? Versus if you were not connected, if you're part of the outside group, if you're part of the poor, if you're, say, Ahmaud Arbery, you're dead. But if you are in Ahmaud Arbery's social status and you're trying to blow the lid off of this whole thing, nobody's going to believe you. Right? Like, that there is just, you are alone, you're isolated, you are without, I talk about affluence. Let's not forget about influence. I'm not able to tell people what to do. People don't listen to me when I'm poor. People don't listen to me unless I'm socially connected, unless I'm normal, unless I'm part of the in crowd. And so when we have these people that are clearly being oppressed, and we see the rich people get away, I mean, I do this all the time. It's easy to do with this politics, right? How many times, and they will do something, and the court of law will be like, that's unconstitutional. That's against the law for you to shut down their business. If I shut down somebody's business as a regular person for a year, and people were like, oh, they ruled that was against the law, I'm going to have to get fined for it, and I'm probably going to jail for like 30 plus years or something, right? If they do it, it happens, right? It's just, or if you're a business person or you're a celebrity. I mean, some of these celebrities, they get like 8 DUIs. Man, I got a bum uncle. He was out after 2, right? Like he's not driving again. Some of these guys, though, it's just chance after chance after chance. And the only thing I can do for them is know that they are well connected, that they are rich, that they are on the in crowd, that they are prosperous. It's not that they're better people, but they're able to get away with more. And that's not fair. And we've got Aaron Goss here. And Aaron, I know that you are not big on talking about inequality at all. No. But this is, we're talking about the verses from Psalms. I just kind of read them all off. Specifically, this is when the exiles are being welcomed back into Jerusalem, and David is looking at them kind of, let's be honest, for the first time. David is certainly, while he was a shepherd, certainly had an in-crowd life most of his life, and getting a look at them and being able to kind of be like, man, these people deserve our food. They deserve our love. I am not a fundamentally better person than them. I'm just able to commit sins and get away with them better than them. You know, and I think David especially acutely aware of this. You do what David did, bang a girl's wife, get that guy killed. I mean, the Bible itself demands that you're dead. But what happens to David? No, you're still king. You're still king. Everything will be all right. You know, everything's all right for David, but it's not all right for these other people. And David himself recognizes that. Aaron, any thoughts about that?
Well, it's related to something that I wanted to say. I actually did the reading for the first time in several weeks. Yeah, I know. It was related to a section I read that it was talking about the kings, the various kings of Israel. And it said something really curious that I hadn't seen elsewhere, which was that one of them was not as wicked as the others, or something like that. You know.
Yeah, I read that.
And I thought that was such a peculiar phrasing, because I don't recall seeing documentation of sin in gradients before. Usually, you know, you sin, and it doesn't matter if you're like poking your brother or if you're killing your brother. You know, like it's all. You know, it's all the same in God's eyes. But the fact that it's documented that like this king was not as bad as the other was before, you know, I thought that was interesting.
That leapt out to me too. Now that you mentioned it, I was like, what? I can't believe I never noticed that before.
Yeah, there was it's either good in God, it did what was right in the Lord's eyes, or did what was wrong. But yeah, we had one king in there who a little bit of both, right? And it does stand out because it is kind of binarily, I mean, mostly getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
And we actually just got introduced to Josiah, so that'll be interesting to talk about next week, because he makes it better, and that lasts for like a year. But like, it is so much easier to take apart a puzzle than put a puzzle back together. So when things are on the way down, any semblance of putting it back together again is hardly even on the table. It takes a lot to even think about that. And it's I used to, when I first read Second Kings, and I was a little kid when I first read it, but I was just like, how do these people keep sucking? And now I'm kind of like, oh well, that's like, how is everybody worse?
Coming out of Exodus, where it's like every single week Moses is doing some sort of major miracle, and they're like, the next day they're like, I don't believe in God anymore. I'm going to need another miracle or to renew my faith for the rest of this 24-hour period.
Right. You know, it's cool. That pillar of fire thing is cool, but I slept on a rock last night. That doesn't feel as good. Yeah, like, I think it gets old when we say, oh, and this was worse than all the people before him, and this was worse than all the people before him. But I mean, look at American politics, right? Like, I mean, worse than all the people before him, worse than all the people before him. We can go back basically to George Washington doing just about this, right? Like, there may be a few exceptions that I will say, like, we're not guys that weren't as bad, but it makes Second Kings all the more relatable, right? That like the vast majority of people in political power suck, and it gets worse, right? Like, all this is getting bad. David's own line is getting worse, right? Like, Solomon not as good, you know, next one even worse, and now we're just falling off, and now we are in free fall with all the various kings, and now they're about to get exiled. There's I didn't actually mention this in my notes, But I remember the one guy, he finds out that from Isaiah that they're all about to be exiled into Babylon. He's like, that's going to happen or whatever. And it's like, yeah, after your reign, maybe 100 years or so, every one of them's going to be exiled. And he's like, well,
at least my reign will be good.
Yeah, at least my reign's going to be all right.
I remember that too.
Just kind of hold on to that.
Let me have some fun.
Yeah, this is at least this is going to be peaceful. Which honestly, I guess that's all you can do, right? Is make your own as peaceful as you can. But it is like we know that there's bad news coming, but it's like as long as it's good news for now, we just kick these cans down the road.
As long as corporate profits continue to soar. Then we won't worry about climate change until it's already upon us. But that's going to be out of my lifetime. So what do I care?
The Great Barrier Reef can rot, but until New York experiences some extra rain, I'm not paying attention anymore.
Yeah.
There's definitely and Ben was actually the one who brought this up. This sounds like an Aaronism, but he was kind of talking about how when you're poor, the systems are designed to kind of keep you poor, how expensive it is to be poor. And then I talked about how cheap it is to be rich. Bill Gates getting the gold McDonald's card and everything like that. And the people who just throw opportunities and housing at you and everything like that. You know, I was watching this story about Ryan Leaf. Everybody knows him as kind of the draft bust or whatever. But I remember this guy got like opportunity after opportunity after opportunity and would F it up every time, right? Like just, I mean, Ryan Leaf is who he is. I'm not saying he's a bad person. And I'm not saying that he's irredeemable either. I want to be very clear about that. But also, like, this is somebody that you work with on redemption, but probably don't put them in positions of influence and power or, you know, money or whatever. You want to keep them in a good environment, right? Like in a good environment where it's easy to do good and difficult to do bad. And I remember it was my mom who really is like, I guess she is, would be considered liberal by today's means, but at the time was very conservative and still kind of is the same way. But I remember just being like, man, if he was black, you'd have never heard his name again, man. Like he is just like, people wouldn't keep doing this for this guy if he was like a poor black kid, you know, he'd just be gone. And I don't know if I can make that like 100% true, because obviously Michael Vick recovered from like a very serious problem. But like, you know, even Michael Vick had money and connections by that time.
He did.
You know, it's just there's a lot of people that make the same mistakes that Ryan Leaf made that were poor black people that we don't even know their names anymore. Right. Like, I mean, it's hard to. In fact, I'm thinking of one. Who was the running back for the Rams? Got cut by Dick Vermeil. He cried about it on camera. You guys are big on sports, right?
Oh yeah, big sports guy right here.
Dick Vermeil. I'm looking this up on Google because it's that important. Lawrence Phillips. That's it. And I mean, he ended up like just totally bottoming out. Nobody helped him, and I think he ended up killing somebody. But I mean, did he kill himself in prison? See, now I'm bot trained. This is how little I know this guy's story, right? Like, just put it in perspective. This guy was the 6th overall draft pick, right? Like, everybody expected big things. And as soon as he got cut, people were just kind of like, oh, well, to hell with him then, right? Like, it's just it's not fair. The world is not fair. Christians are called to try and make it more fair, right? We have all these verses this week, and I'm glad you guys both read this, because like I really love the series of Psalms we got this week that are like, I get it. They're poor, they're suffering, they're not going to get better without a lot of help because the world's working against them, and you are the ones that are called to make it better. And I think that's a lot of what we need to take away as Christians. We need to stop being worried about teaching a man to fish, giving a man a fish, whatever. We can do both. We can give out fish, we can teach to fish. And you know what? If they're really just lazy, God will work that out. He's promised to work that out. That's not on us. Anyhow, a lot of rambling there. I guess any other thoughts on that subject in general? Because I quoted, like, I'm stuffing all the Psalms into this part here before we move on to something else. So anything else in that area?
No.
Okay. I mentioned I typed a little bit about each of them. Aaron, I decided I'm going to save the part unless you wanted to talk about them a lot, but the parts about the church at Thessalonica and that start, and Ephesus and that start, I figure we should probably talk about it when we actually read Thessalonians and Ephesians.
Yeah, that's totally fine. I have
Yeah.
a note from the New Testament that it's not about that.
Oh yeah, please.
Okay, so it's about the story. It's taught like it feels like it's almost an aside to Paul's story. It doesn't happen in front of Paul. But
Okay.
there's a group of 7 Jewish men that are going around proselytizing, and they come across this like naked man that's got an evil spirit in him, and they try to cast the spirit out and fail. And for some reason, inexplicably in the story, as far as I could tell, I've read it several times to make sure I wasn't missing something. Because of their failure, they bring glory to Jesus and cause this like minor upset in the religious, like the non-Christian religious order, to like make them burn their religious books and things like that. And I thought that was so weird because like they failed to cast out the demon, but it somehow managed to like bring glory to God anyway. I didn't know what to make of that.
Yeah, you're good. I talked about the first part of this with Apollos, because it's that same section when they're talking about Apollos, and so I guess I'll get back to him in a minute. Yeah, this is something that does happen in Ephesus, but it's not related to the church, so I guess it's worth talking about this time. Because yeah, the evil spirit recognizes them, and the man who has them jumps on them and rips off their robes. They're naked, bleeding when they leave. Right, they almost get torn up by this guy. And then, as a result of this, 2 things happen. One is it says the people were seized with fear, and the second is then they held the name of Lord Jesus in high honor. And we're like, what was honorable about what just happened?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like whatever. But
I wrote down, I know Jesus and I know Paul, but who are you?
You give me.
yeah.
That was pretty significant.
Right. So the big thing here, and my best guess on this one, Ben, I would be curious because this is just a guess on my part. We're not told exactly why this happens, but my theory on this is if I were to watch somebody, let's say I'm just a Christian, and I watch a Hindu person try to convert or try to witness to somebody who's possessed or whatever, and the person who's possessed goes like, oh, I recognize the spirit of Krishna about you, and I know you, and says that person's name having never met them before. Then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, so there's something about the demons that recognize that Jesus is the main antagonist to them, right? Like it's like, oh my gosh, that's Jesus, and that's you. You are,
Right.
whatever your name is, you're the enemy of me, the demon. And so when you recognize that somebody's violent, demon possessed, angry, whatever, we again, this is demon possessed a little bit. We can argue about if this is like a evocation type experience, or if this is actually like an exorcism, or if this is just somebody who is a hateful, bad person or whatever. Probably a little of the. I would lean towards it's the exorcism kind of thing, because how else does this demon simply recognize Jesus or whatever? But it's a bad person. They are demon possessed. Well, I guess they're demon possessed. I don't know about them as people. But when they recognize that Jesus is the main enemy, that causes them to rethink their own faith. And they kind of say like, oh, I thought Artemis, right? Somebody else we read in actually later in this very chapter. Artemis was the main enemy. I thought they were going to say Zeus was the main bad guy. But instead they're like, oh no, Jesus is the bad guy whom the devils fear. And I think that's why it specifically says the name Lord Jesus was held in high honor. I like the way it phrased that, because it's not like they instantly convert, but they recognize that there's, especially mythology and Greek religions, I could talk about this for a long time, was one of the weirdest parts of my theological studies, was studying mythology. It doesn't work like most other religions as we would practically know them, but they kind of add Jesus to the pantheon. They even call him in the verse Lord Jesus, right? That they give him a title. And so it's like he's kind of then put on their pantheon. They still don't quite understand it very well, right? Like it's like I don't know what it is, but I do know that he made the demons scared. And so that's why he get recognized. I think that makes sense. I know I kind of used a lot of words to say it, but that would be my guess. Ben, or what are your thoughts on this?
Well, you did a good job explaining it. That made more sense. It suddenly clicked. Okay, I get it. When they realized that the demons could care less about them, but they were scared shitless about Jesus, that was quite the eye opener for all of them. And they would have told everybody what happened. Plus there was witnesses. So, and it seems like there was a common issue of demon possession in that era, that period of time, because there's more than one reference of demon possession during that time period. And it just makes you wonder if there was a real problem with it during that period of time. Because it's more than one situation.
Yeah, it certainly seemed to be more of a thing than it is today. We've talked about this before, Ben. I think this might have been before you were a regular of ours, but we were kind of talking about like, is what they're talking about something like epilepsy, right? Like, is what they're talking about? Because there are verses that say like possessed by a demon, and then in other gospels they're like, oh, has the shakes or whatever. And we're just kind of like, oh, okay, this could be either epilepsy or, what's the neurodegenerative? The
seizures and
Parkinson's. Yeah, something like that, right? Like we recognize it, and Jesus heals it. And we're like, well, they called that demon possession, but in reality, Jesus was actually healing like a very physical remedy. The Bible kind of recognizes those as the same. We had a lively debate about it. I don't think any consensus, but that basically that unwellness is tied to evil and healing is tied to good. And so these people are in a state of unwellness. So when we call it like infected with demons, we can say, oh, well, demons isn't the right way to say it. They really just have like a splinter in there.
Well, that's still going. There's the Pentecostal groups and stuff are still like that way. You're sick, and the first thing they go is, "What's the demon?"
Yeah, right.
They see a demon under every rock. Ironically, Shiny Happy People, Bill Gothard, toward the end there of his dynasty, where he was really going good, he started really getting into demon stuff, and there was demons under every corner and every rock and every rug. And my mom and dad got caught up in that for a while.
And it's funny because they're not really learning this verse, because in the same section, what happens is all the sorcerers take their scrolls and burn them, right? Like we're told about that because their ways didn't work, right? Their ways were, and to be fair to Aaron's original point too, and I'd like Aaron's thoughts on this as well, their way didn't work either, right? This evil demon still is possessed. They even commanded him to come out, still didn't work. And so it is a confusing thing, because it's like, well, I think like if the demon left, that would have kind of been more like, wow, that was an amazing thing we saw. But just the recognition that this demon recognizes Lord Jesus as an enemy versus
and also Paul
as an enemy. Yeah. Right. Great point. Yeah. That Paul and Jesus as enemies versus these sorcerers who were like, oh, but we can magic away this or whatever. And the demon doesn't even recognize them. The demon's like, oh, what they're doing is useless. Right. And so they come and burn all their scrolls because they're like, these are useless. This has been a waste of time and money. You mentioned, Ben, how much people were obsessed with possessions and demons and stuff like that. There was a lot of work put into this, right? Like a lot of effort. There were economies built on this entire thing, on curing demons and getting rid of demons. Correct. And the reason that this book burning or scroll burning, as it would, we're even told it came to the value of 50,000 drachmas worth of papers burned, is because they're doing away with a whole industry at this point. They're saying, you guys are charlatans, and I don't want your stuff anywhere near here anymore. The real medicine is Paul or Jesus, whatever. They kind of have to clarify this later. Again, we will learn about this when we learn in Ephesians what kind of the better remedy for this is. But yeah, Yeah. Anyway, Aaron, what were your thoughts about this one? Since you obviously at least thought about it enough to ask the question.
Well, yeah. So I guess my big sticking point, besides just the fact that it took off so much as a story, after they failed to take out, cast out the demon, is reckoning with the fact that these Jews are going around preaching in Jesus' name and attempting to speak on his behalf, and not in a bad way. Like they seem sincere and they seem like they're doing it in Jesus' name, and yet they fail. And it produces good outcomes, but I can't imagine it would be particularly like. I think it would be humbling to the people who failed, and somewhat demoralizing, and I have to wonder, like, why did Jesus let them fail, like, I mean, it obviously it produced good results, but like, yeah, as you said earlier, it could have very well produced those good results if they'd succeeded rather than failed. And like, why is the demon scared of Paul, who probably could have cast the demon out? Like, why are people bestowed in those different capacities to do those things? It's not a question that can really be answered. It's just something to ponder.
I was just going to say, what is the answer? Because there really
there
isn't one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way it got is interesting. There's another one from the Old Testament. I didn't quote it again, but I guess because it's relevant. We have this guy, and Isaiah, I think it's Isaiah, who tells him, "Yeah, your kingdom's going to fall apart right now, or he says you're going to die right now." And the guy is like, humbles himself or whatever, and it's like, "Okay, God changes his mind; He's going to let you live now."
Yeah.
So like the way of God, we're told the way of the Lord is mysterious, and this is one of those that, it's there. You can be perfectly righteous and you say, in the name of the demon, come out. You can also be perfectly righteous and say, in the name of the Lord, like, come out, and the demon doesn't leave. Like, we have examples both. Like, Jesus' name, even if you're a righteous person, is not carte blanche for success. It's not an automatic, well, I guess carte blanche, that's the wrong term, but it's not an automatic success.
Well, we've also seen people who are not righteous at all try to do stuff and succeed.
True.
It just seems kind of random.
It really is, thy will be done. I mean, Jesus, let this cup pass from me, right? And then God's like, no, right? I mean, so Jesus asks for something that is not granted to him either. That we need to recognize that as Christians, we're gonna fail, right? Like, we're not anywhere close. I'm not anywhere close to his I don't have the relationship with God that Paul has or whatever. I'm on my own journey. But even if I did, like, that knowledge is still there that I will probably fail even in good ventures, that there are certain things that are there. And this is one of those, maybe this is one of those, we use the fruit of the Spirit challenge that Jesus issues. Like, what's the result of this demon not leaving this person? Are the people more kind, patient, loving, peaceful, self-controlled? And I think especially by abandoning this entire industry, I would argue probably yes. And leaving this person around to contend with is something that is a constant reminder. We look at Aaron, you brought up all the stuff that happens in Exodus, and it's almost like if it's not a constant reminder, they're gonna forget tomorrow. It's like even the manna, like one day without it, and they're like, screw this, like, did we even ever have any? So like having that ongoing emblem of success, you're kind of or emblem of why the gospel is necessary, why Jesus Christ is Lord, I guess is probably a good thing. And I guess it's the way he chooses to do it. God's in charge of the calculus. I'm not. I'm just over here trying to figure out the equations. Yeah.
I had a few meta questions that aren't necessarily directly related to the Bible, but obviously they're relevant in this section. Sure. So Artemis, being such a prominent figure in the New Testament at this time period, is the rest of the Greek pantheon basically an artifact, and it's just Artemis at this point?
Okay, so no, they are all the whole pantheon is there. In fact, Apollos is named after maybe another Greek god you may have heard of, also mentioned in here. So there are different gods and goddesses. They all exist. There are cities that kind of have temples to one or the other or multiples, some with none of them, and looking into like lesser gods and stuff like that. There's really nothing quite like mythology. And I'll try to explain this as best I can, that what makes it different. And it's that the Greeks were aware that they were creating this. And they were very aware that they were like, this is that we are writing our fate. So when we read something, a good example is the book Medea.
Mm-hmm.
Some people might have had to read that in school or whatever, is a retelling of the story about Jason and the Argonauts. And Medea is the antagonist in that. And the Greeks get to a certain point where they're thinking about this, and they're like, I love Medea. It's what's it, Euripides? But Euripides is looking at this and he's like, now wait a minute, Jason is cheating, he is greedy, he's got all these terrible qualities, he's like with all these other people. Yes, Medea poisons him and kills him, but I think Medea had a right to, based on all these other things that Jason did. And so they write this story and it becomes part of their pantheon. It becomes part of the story. It would be like if somebody today wrote something about Christianity and we're just like, I like that, toss that in the Bible, right? Like that works for me. And some of these are retellings. Some of these shape and change what was understood, what we know. The story of, Ulysses is a good one. Odysseus, I guess, right? I'm confusing my Greek with my Roman here. But that these were stories that they changed. They would write stories about Artemis knowing they were fiction, but they would still contemplate about that wisdom and still create temples to it so that people could think about that wisdom and let it resonate with them. And in that way it becomes, and this is where it kind of answers your point best, Aaron, is it's almost like a team sport, that you kind of put the way we see Artemis and our temple of Artemis, that's our team. We value that goddess of the hunt. We value, archery, value these things. We value those things. And we're going to create all this literature and stuff and put it into this goddess, Artemis. And that is going to be our representative. And then we will go, and especially the Greeks will go and compete. This is how they compete. Like our Artemis people will compete with the Zeus people. And they're like, we're the father of storms and and all these other stories that they have about Zeus and what makes Zeus so great and their perceptions of Zeus. And they would write literature and be like, let's give it to Zeus. Let's make him this guy. So yeah, you do get this whole thing where it's like, is she the only one in this area?
Yeah.
She's not. She kind of is. It's like, are there any Raiders fans in Denver? Yeah, yes, but like they are proud to be associated with Artemis generally, right?
So
like,
Artemis is so heavily involved in this section of the Bible because these sections that Paul is visiting in Greece,
Ephesus, Greece,
yeah, are Artemis territory, for lack of a word. Okay.
Yeah. Correct. They've decided to deify their team sport. That's very disrespectful to how I'm putting it, and I could get deeper into it, but I hope that at least that makes
the Greek mythology nerds are going to be pissed at you.
Yeah, they should. I think I did nobody happy. The mythology people would like to clarify it, but yeah.
I guess like my question, I originally thought that Artemis was so well followed because like the parts of her portfolio, the things that make Artemis or whatever, were just more appealing to the Greeks of that time period than the others. And like Zeus was no longer as relevant as a figure as, I don't remember. Is Artemis the harvest deity or is that?
Hunt, wilderness, animals, I believe birth, fertility, and the moon.
How did you just remember all that?
Looking it up while I was
like, how in the world?
And I probably missed some because that's the AI answer. Let me check Wikipedia. Oh,
Well,
also vegetation.
Yeah, I was gonna
and
say,
chastity as well. It's kind
is
of
the
an
harvest one Persephone? Is that what I don't remember. The reason I bring it up is like you would think that
Demeter.
I thought Demeter was the winter, like cold.
But isn't that the whole thing that she takes
I
away
may
her
just
power?
be mixing it up with Hades into the game. Like,
Demeter is agriculture, harvest, and fertility. Yeah, the reason we associate Demeter with cold is because she takes away her job. She quits her job.
yeah.
And then we get the cold. And unfortunately, we know her more for quitting her job than creating it. Now, Aaron, to the core of your question, you're not wrong. There are some places where, and Zeus is actually a really good example of this, that the culture wanes in certain places, and therefore the god, that temple, like the people who are obsessed with them, kind of fall off a little bit. It would be like, what if we associated, let's take a real, oh no, I don't want to do it to my Colorado Rockies, but they're not good right now. But just say the Cleveland Browns, right? That the Browns are not a major football factor. They've never been to a Super Bowl. They've been around in the entire Super Bowl era, whatever. Now pretend that we kind of assign groups of virtues to these football teams, and that we just kind of see fans stop showing up to the games. People stop being as interested in them. Nobody's deleting them. They're still around. You can still buy Cleveland Brown. Trust me, you can buy Brown season tickets. They are available, but people kind of don't want to anymore, And so if we were to associate certain like virtues and gods and stuff like that with the Cleveland Browns, then them falling off the map kind of, it kind of, and this sounds stupid, but we do this with, if you listen to soccer teams talk a lot about this, next time you watch the Olympics, get a transcript of the coaches of the losing teams, especially if they're like European, and listen to them talk. And almost all of them, if they lose, will inevitably blame impure blood on their team. Yeah. And just be like, there must have been too many. I mean, look at remember when the French guys won the World Cup and they had all those, 90% of the team is black, right?
Yeah.
I remember the backflips they did to say they look black, but they are all actually 100% French, right? Like, it's very important that everybody thinks of them as French, that from birth, these are perfect, pure-blooded French people. And it was ridiculous, right? Like, you'd be like, that's from Ghana, Nigeria, right? Like, obviously it was untrue, but that it was very important to them that they saw it that way. And so we kind of have a similar issue here, right? Like that people want, when they root for their teams, they're kind of rooting for themselves. There's a lot of ego to it. And this is also something that the Greek philosophers and writers were very well aware of, that a lot of their ego was going into this. And so that they were like, what makes us us? What makes this city? What makes our mentality this mentality? What makes it so cool that we're like this? Or in some cases, so not cool that we're like this. Why what are some of the weaknesses? All the gods have their weaknesses, right? What is kind of our fatal flaws in this city? What are our problems? And kind of follow those around a little bit. Again, Ben, you said it right. I'm probably pissing off a lot of mythology people right now. I absolutely loved the courses I took in college, but it really is, it's hard to describe. And I probably could, if I majored in mythology as opposed to theology, I would probably have like a deeper understanding, and I would appreciate it. It would be interesting. Aaron, did that answer?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Did you kind of have a related topic? I mean, it's not related in the sense that it's related to this topic, but it's related in the sense that it's also meta and not necessarily like directly related to the reading this week.
Mm-hmm.
In the Old Testament, when they're going through the chronicles of failed kings and everything like that, they continue to reference a book, the book of the history of the kings of Israel and the book of the history of the kings of Judah.
Yeah.
I'm curious, do those books, they no
don't exist, destroyed, gone?
Yeah.
If they ever existed at all. Obviously, as a Christian, I would have to say that they did exist, but people weren't keeping track of them, and they were destroyed.
Well, I always wondered if they got destroyed when they got exiled to Babylon.
It's possible. The Babylonian captivity is unique. It's a lot less violent than the Assyrian captivity. We're going to see a couple of different captivities,
Yeah,
but
there's a few there.
But yeah, I mean, I think when they destroyed the Temple of Solomon. But again, these so the tough thing about this is these aren't holy books, right? These are the reason they're not in the Bible is because they're referencing them as political books at the time period. By that note, there's actually some controversy if Numbers should be included in the Bible at all, because Leviticus was supposed to be the religious side and Numbers was supposed to be the political side. But I guess when you have a theocratic society, it makes sense to include both. They still kind of have a theocratic society, for being honest. They're just really bad at doing it. But they've essentially chose, that this was lost, probably destroyed. I'm guessing it's not like there was only one copy and they forgot it someplace. So probably destroyed. I think, Ben, your instinct is probably right that maybe during the time of the Babylons, maybe the time of the destruction of the Temple of Solomon, they probably destroyed lots of other cultural things as well. We lose the Ark at that time, the Ark of the Covenant, and so there's a good chance that it's coming up here. It always gets me while we're on the subject, whenever they're like, and to this day it's called that. And I'm like, I hate saying that because it's not to this day. It's to this day when the guy who wrote it. But if I'm taking the Bible as like an eternal document, it's like, and to this day, that's why people do headstands outside the gate. So people don't do headstands outside the gate anymore. So
I actually thought for years that it was actually current. I didn't, and then all of a sudden it hit me one day. Well, because I was taught that too. I was taught to believe it that way. And then all of a sudden it hit me. It's like, that would be to this day the guy who wrote this.
Right. Yeah, they set up a lot of these stone altars and give it a name. And they're like, to this day, that's why everybody goes there. Like, you don't have that stone altar anymore, right? Nope. Like, it's not even close, right? Like,
it got knocked down in a lightning strike 317 years ago.
Yeah, right. Right. Nobody set it back up. And unfortunately, to Ben, to your point, this is kind of people hinge their faith on the gospel not being historic, but current, right? They don't want to see it that way. And so therefore they're using the gospel inaccurately. They argue inappropriately that they love the Bible more because they're like, well, I believe in, universe created in 7 days. I must love the Bible more. And Stephen's like, listen, I've been through the Bible a lot, but you are actually doing it a disservice by pretending it's things that it itself says it is not. You are not using it as the tool that it is supposed to be. It's a good tool, but you're not using it that way. That kind of gets to one of the points I have. Let's see my note here where they talk about Stephen again. I'm sorry, they don't talk about Stephen again, but I'm talking about Stephen again. Oh yes. So we read, this is again in the Old Testament, since we're on the subject. However, he did not kill the children of the assassins, for he obeyed the command of the Lord as written by Moses in the book of the law. Parents must not be put to death for the sins of their children, nor children for the sins of their parents. Those deserving to die must be put to death for their own crimes. Literally, the verse before the book before that, some dude goes and kills all of Ahab's kids.
Mm-hmm.
And we're told that God told him to do it, right? That this is the right thing to do. You've got to kill all the kids. You've got to kill all the kids. And literally, I think it's either 1 or 2 chapters after it, but we got this guy immediately after. I remember I'm reading one day and I read that, and then I read this the next day that, of course, he did what God actually told him to do, which is don't kill people's kids, right?
Wasn't one of them where it was this week's reading, I think it was, or last, I think it was this week's, where, kill them all, even down to the child in the womb.
Yeah.
And I'm like, did God really tell them to literally cut babies out of wombs? I can't wrap my head around that.
We need to, and this is why I say it, is this is a contradiction within the Bible. Indisputably, irreconcilably, it should not bother us to say this. Again, I quoted this a lot, but we have 2 instances of the census. Who inspires David to do the census? One says it's God, one says it's Satan. These two elements are not close, right? God and Satan are opposites. They're not the same, right? And so it's not like, oh, well, we almost nailed it. No, one of these verses is right and the other one is wrong. One of these people was right, the other one is wrong. This is why Stephen goes into his spiel, and I love Stephen, but I love what he quotes with this. He's like, this is why we have the Holy Spirit. On this hand, I have one verse that said Jesus literally lives in this temple. Right. And that actually was also part of the reading this week when they're like, oh, yeah, God lives in this temple. Right. That's where God's home is. He's literally residing there. The Bible tells us like God appears as like a fine mist right in that location. And then he's just there watching TV, drinking sodas, smoking cigarettes. And if you need anything, here are the people that are allowed to talk to him. Right. And then Stephen quotes another verse also from the Old Testament. And this one from Isaiah and Isaiah says, God can't live on this earth, or not can't, but doesn't. Like he lives in everywhere. He's omnipresent. It doesn't make sense for him to have a house. The way Isaiah says it is something like who could design a house so nice that it's nicer than all of the heavens? Because the house itself would have to exist in the heavens. God gets everything. Right? Like you're never going to design a house nice enough for God to live in it. These two verses cannot make sense together. And so Stephen's like, I don't hate the law of Moses. I've studied it. I get it. But I have to choose between these verses. And when I pray and I use the Holy Spirit and I think about it, that God tells me the answer. And that answer, Aaron, Ben, anybody else listening to this, of which there are a few. I appreciate everybody watching here, by the way. But if you think about it, what answer do you come to? Did God literally physically live in that temple? Or is he omnipresent? Is he all over the universe? It's a really obvious answer to non-Christians who, I want to say pray, but think about it, right? Like it's a really obvious answer to us. But they are so held down by this part of the Old Testament. Like I said, they completely have to ignore this part of the Old Testament in order to make this part work. That these things that contradict, I can try to make sense of them. But ultimately, it's the Holy Spirit that reveals that truth. And we need to choose who was right. Is the guy who killed Ahab's kids, cousins, moms, babies, as Ben mentioned, other people down to the womb, right? Like that were cutting babies out of stomachs and crushing them, breaking animals' legs and leaving them hobbled in the fields. Was that guy doing what God said? Because he said he did what God said. It's in the Bible. Or do we have these other laws as well as the Holy Spirit saying, man, don't do stuff like that. That's so unloving. That's so awful. That's so messed up. And I use the Holy Spirit, and I think everybody's going to get that same answer, like when they pray about it. The idea that this is like, oh, I don't know, that the Holy Spirit leads us in different directions, I find to be fundamentally flawed. I feel like the more we rely on the Holy Spirit, the more this answer becomes very clear that God does not want us butchering children of bad people just because they happen to be children of bad people.
It's another prime example of why you cannot be a literalist with the Bible.
Absolutely not. Aaron, any thoughts?
I don't have any more thoughts. No.
Okay, cool.
Hey guys, I need to step out.
Okay.
I just realized what time it is. My daughter's going to kill me. I got to put my daughter to bed.
Oh, that's right. We're 15 minutes over. Hey, we'll try to get you to talk about Diddy and stuff next week if that's cool for you. I know you had some thoughts about it.
I did. Well, okay. I mean, do you want to go there real quick?
If you got time, I'd love to. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's do that Diddy discussion real quick.
And give your daughter my apologies, but it's worth it.
I can hear them. They haven't killed me yet. So.
Okay.
So with the Diddy situation, this has been it's a reminder to us. There's several thoughts I had. One is what we already discussed at the beginning of the show, is that wealthy people get by with things that regular people would not. So our justice system is not justice. It's an elitist system. And the elites get by unless it's, I mean, for the most part, the elites get off. But the other thing that I wanted to bring up that I was thinking about all day today. What has happened with Diddy? I mean, the guy is just a vile. His behaviors, his actions were evil, abhorrent, vile, disgusting. I mean, just every adverb and adjective you can think of to describe how horrible he was. And I can't imagine how many victims. I can't imagine how many victims haven't even spoken out because it's so bad they don't even want to speak out about it, because the majority of victims can't speak out because because they haven't healed enough. Because what happens is they try to speak out, they actually will start to relive the trauma, and then they get stuck in a trauma cycle, and it's very dangerous, and they become suicidal and self-destructing, and toxic, and addictions take over. So a lot of people, though, and the numbers, the statistics back this up. You can Google this while I'm talking, but a lot of people most people who are sexually abused, physically abused, sexually abused, do not get justice, because it's one of the hardest crimes to prove. It's one of the hardest crimes to really find somebody guilty. So as a result, most people are not willing to actually testify or come forward, because when they do, the law requires that they have to literally relive the whole thing down to every period, every dot, just every part of what occurred has to be relived. And a lot of people have worked so hard to get past that, they cannot relive what would have to be done. So as a result, the perpetrators often get off and get by with. So the percentage of sexual abusers that actually get found guilty is extremely low. I think it's
7%.
Yeah, thank you. I knew it was under 10%.
Holy.
It's of actual sexual crimes that actually get found where there's a conviction.
Wow.
And that's something that is
I knew it was
so
bad.
important.
I didn't know it was that bad.
It's really, really bad. When you figure that was 1 in every 6 girls and 1 in every 8 or 9 boys have been sexually abused, and now you realize only 7% of those abusers are actually going to get found guilty. So one of the great dark secrets in our society, United States of America, is we basically have a society of a repeat cycle of sexual perversion, and our justice system is so screwed up in such a mess that there's not a way. Justice is supposed to be blind, but the justice system is not helping the abused, and the abusers get off, and that's why they tend to repeat offense. So that was some thoughts I had. I was really angry today, very angry, when I read the news report.
It's so hard, because he was like, and I know the defense. I was hopeful, because they even told the jury, like, we're not going to contest the domestic violence. Like, we know we did it. There's no way around it, right? But everything was just that you can't prove it. There was no video camera. You can't prove it. There's no video camera. And they're right? Like the things that he got convicted on was like one of the trafficking ones, because it's like they actually did like manage to find the payment that was processed,
right?
Transaction, and like transportation, right? Like that, like he got caught on a camera,
prostitution, transportation.
While making that, right? Those are the 2 that he got convicted on, and only because there's a camera. The rest that occurs in the dark, a reasonable person pretty much knows what happened, right? But we can't.
Society knows what happened.
So, right. And now here is my bigger issue, because ultimately, I think from a legal system, I don't want more people found guilty. And I know, like, obviously when it's 7%, that's bad, right? Like, I do want more people to get justice, but I do think we tend to, if we look at it as a whole, there's a lot that we convict people on that are innocent of what they do. And I do think it's important to have that high threshold of proof. But what you're saying, the reason it's low is often not because we fail to hit the threshold. It's because cops don't want to do their job. They don't want to investigate. How many of us think about this? Basically, I remember this was a joke on like Seinfeld, like 30 years ago. People were, if your car gets broken into, how much work are they going to gonna go to make sure the person who broke into your car gets brought to justice?
It's not going to happen.
Right. I'm over here expecting a fingerprint kit. None of that's happening. Right? Are they gonna pull video cameras from my neighbors' houses or from the parking lot? They have to be pulled.
Now I'll guarantee you, if that was Bill Gates' car that got broke into, there'd be.
Oh yeah, no.
Just saying.
If you go through the effort of getting that footage yourself and submitting it to them, they might look at it.
Right. That essentially that you have to do the investigation to get justice for yourself. And like you mentioned this, Ben, like the torment that you go through, one of the toughest, I think the hardest part of Shiny Happy People was at the end when all those people finally came forward to talk about how Gothard had assaulted them. And they went through it all, and it took years. They draw it out, your name's all over the place. You know, even if it's not supposed to be, a leak will happen. They're going to know it's you. And the defense will be like, oh, I don't know what happened. You know what I mean? I guess that sometimes that just happens, you know? And so that these people have to deal with this torment. And the people at the end of Shiny Happy, this is the heartbreaking part. They were like, I just wish I didn't do it. And it's so hard to hear because they're like, it's true. But what happened at the end? Well, when we didn't have proof beyond a reasonable doubt, which we should know, that's probably going to be true in almost every case. I mean, sex crimes, people aren't doing it in the middle of traffic on a Sunday, right? Like right. Like the purpose is they bring you here to these private places to assault you. They bring you to these places. They make sure they're in a place where they're not going to get caught or when they're covered for, with Diddy, we saw a small leak, right? The elevator video, we saw a small leak. And like, that's all, everything else has this tight lid on it, right? They want this tight lid on it. And so these people and then afterwards, the guy runs victory laps as though, we can't prove it means didn't actually do it, right? As opposed to, sorry, we don't have the evidence of that, which is absolutely what it is in this Diddy case, right? We have video footage of what we have. Here's what we don't have. Any common sense person could put it together, but we don't actually have like video footage, transactions, whatever, all this other stuff, And so there's going to be no justice for all this other stuff because it's something that happens in private. And it's a terrible thing because, I mean, this goes to what you're mentioning. I'm giving a lot of leeway here to the justice system, but they would do a more concerted effort to prove somebody was guilty. In fact, we see innocent people convicted of these same crimes with far less evidence. And why is it they get convicted while Diddy doesn't?
The bar has to be high. Otherwise, we would have, oh my gosh, it would be so bad. But when this Diddy situation, one of the things that just so angers me is, there's witnesses. There has to be. In those those parties, those groups, there are witnesses, but people are not speaking up. They have chosen to remain silent when they could speak up and get justice for these victims. And it's out of fear. They know, because they would suffer if they spoke up. Diddy's got a cult following of people, and the media would destroy anybody that it would be horrible, but it would get justice. And that's the part that I guess that troubles me the most is the bar I hate it, but you're right. The bar, and here I am, a sexual abuse survivor saying this, but I know the bar has to be high because we cannot be putting innocent people in jail. Yeah. It just cannot be. And that's already happening way too much.
Sure.
And that's been proven.
You just want a thorough and honest investigation, right? Yes. That's all you're asking for. This is a shockingly terrible statistic, but you're more likely to get away with murder today than you were 30 years ago. Now we're going before DNA testing. Why is it you're more likely to get away with murder? Well, because a lot of those murders are done in the inner city and they're done against poor people. And that's all there is to it, is they don't want to investigate. I had a friend, I won't disclose his name, but he was an officer in Chicago. And whenever there was a shooting, the operators knew to put DAN, which stands for dumb ass N-word. And not because they're trying to say that about the victim, but just that like basically it's like, oh, it's just black people shooting a gun and a gun went off again. And so they put that as an alert to let the officers know what it was, right? But I mean, it might not be intentionally disparaging towards the victim, but it's very disparaging towards black people, especially the ones who are getting killed by this, right? That what we have here is an unprecedented, and this, I think I'm more in your camp now that I'm talking myself into it, Ben. But like the more I think about it, we have an unprecedented ability with all this video camera and forensics and all these things that we do. We have an unprecedented ability to be able to get justice for these crimes. And yet we're getting less and less convictions of them because the victims are poor. That's it. They're not connected. That's it. Right? Like, I don't know. It's tough. Aaron, you've been rather quiet, but any thoughts about the Diddy situation or what we're talking about in general?
I haven't been following it. It's kind of depressing. I try to, as much other stuff as I follow that depresses me, I think I'd stay out of that.
Fair enough. The news is pretty sad. Well, Ben, thank you so much for your time, man. I really appreciate it, dude. Have a good night. We'll see you next week.
I sure enjoy it. See you next week. Bye.
I didn't get to say it, but Bray, what up? Appreciate it. I know he was in the middle of talking about sexual assault, and I was like, I probably shouldn't interrupt him to say what up. Oh, man. Yeah. But yeah, obviously it was what it was. Aaron, any other notes that you had about the Bible? It's never too late to go back to that.
No, I covered everything I thought of.
Okay, cool. We had two stories that I wanted to talk about. Both were kind of wild. One is generic for non-theology majors. You may find this interesting, but it's a brief verse in Acts. And Paul says, I know that false teachers like vicious wolves will come in among you after I leave, not sparing the flock. Even some men from your own group will rise up and distort the truth in order to draw a following. So there's a couple of theocratic elements to pull away from this, but basically this verse is quoted. Now, are we blowing it out of proportion? Maybe, but in general, in Christianity, when you study it, this verse in particular indicates the fall of the primitive church, that after Paul, it's dead. Paul does not ascribe an error. We don't get the nice joint / transfer of leadership from Peter to Paul like we do in the Bible, that it's over after Paul. It's non-restored. So when they talk about restoration, what does that word mean? Now, obviously there's the restoration of your soul being restored. But as far as like a church thing goes, the idea is that after this, the church falls apart. That's how it says, not sparing the flock. So if you think of like an organizational structure of sheep, that the flock is destroyed, that doesn't mean all the sheep are dead. That just means they're not a unified flock anymore. Right. So when the church claims to be restored, we're the restored church of God. This would include the Catholics, the LDS Church, the Orthodox Church, are all restored churches. They believe that God has come and said, I have reestablished my church again. And you are all like, the flock is now back. This is like the main organizational hub that I deal with. And they're doing the things that the primitive church would do, doing all those jobs. So you have a point after Paul where people stop getting those titles, titles that they were getting during the Bible, like deacon, priest, bishop, and any names like that are all gone. If you wonder why like different religions all have like Catholics and Orthodox have like same names for like the equivalent positions, it's not because they copied each other. It's because they're all trying to get it from the Bible, right? LDS Church does this big time. 2 quorums of the 70 are established in the primitive church. And so they have 2 quorums of 70, 12 apostles, something like that. You're going to see a lot of these categories. Now that's good, like knowledge for like understanding different denominations and where they're coming from. One thing that I wanted to focus on, kind of the more interesting thing I feel with this, is that the false teachers, like vicious wolves, so again, this is the wolf in sheep's clothing thing, will come in among you after I leave. So they are coming from within the church, not from without the church, that their greatest enemies are themselves, destroying them apart. And this is quite a thing for Paul to say, because Paul's about to get killed by some people that do not believe in God. But the thing that's going to kill him is their own individual structure, people taking advantage of it. And again, he says, even some men in your own group. And so this one he's saying, so the church is going to be destroyed from within, including this church that I'm that I'm at right now. Go ahead, Aaron.
Well, I was going to say, I hadn't thought about it before now, but as a result of you talking about this just now, made me think, why didn't Paul put more effort into future-proofing the church? Yeah, I guess I'll just start with that and ask that.
I can make it simple. I think the explanation was that it was God's plan for it to fall apart for a bit.
I mean, but it kind of never recovered. I mean, arguably, like I don't think that the church was ever as good as it was in the early church while Paul was alive.
Yeah. I would agree with you. I don't want to dig on anybody who happens to be part of a restored church, but yes, I don't see any church doing the good that the primitive church is doing. They get close sometimes when they're like doing disaster relief.
Yeah, individual churches can, but like the church as an institution, including all denominations, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's worse than it's ever been now.
Yeah.
Christianity is a shell of what it's supposed to stand for.
Yeah, I mean, we just talked about it. 74% of the friggin' white evangelicals still support Trump and everything he's doing. Like, it's tough, and so we are in a bad place, and that means stuff like this we're getting taken advantage of. Like wolves among us.
Paul covered so much territory. Not physically, but also I was in his letters and everything like that. Territory in both the physical sense and the broadening the scope of what Christianity stands for.
Yeah,
and surely he would have realized the need to have somebody to pass down the torch, and he just didn't do it. And
yeah, I mean, and the answer, I guess, as I'm supposed to answer is, as well as I'd say the one that I generally go with, is that he consulted God, and God was like, this needs to happen. Like, it needs to fall apart. It needs to be, it needs to we need to have this, period of, I guess, what I would call Christian diaspora, right? Where it goes all over the world individually as opposed to within a structure. And there needs to be this time. And then eventually that structure will come back, and we will be better people for having gone through, I guess I call it time in the wilderness, right? Like this
2,000 years in the wilderness,
2,000 years in the wilderness, waiting for something good to happen. Yeah. And for this church to come back, that there's going to be things that we see, things that we understand better, including about ourselves, I think, from this time. We certainly understand a lot of what the Jews were going through when they were in the wilderness for 40 years, and hopefully could learn a lot about ourselves for 2,000 years, And that's the answer. It's not fun.
It's not satisfying, but
if it were not God's request, Paul definitely dropped the ball. That's for sure. Yeah. Especially because Paul was putting so much thought into it. I mean, nobody is more passionate about church structure than Paul, right? Yeah. Like, this is a guy who was like, hey, write to these guys. Here's what you need to be doing. Here's what we need to be doing. Here's how to organize over here. Here's how to organize over here. And for him to be like, I'm about to die, and that's about to be a wrap, everybody. Like,
GG,
no legacy. Yeah, GG, bro. It was a good game. And I'm like, wait a minute. There's no next game. There's no game 2. And it was a shock even at that time. People thought Timothy was going to take over, and did not. So, yeah. And then there's one more, and it's, he broke the bronze serpent that Moses had made because the people of Israel had been offering sacrifices to it. This is freaking wild. Like, I don't know of an equivalent. This would be like us having Jesus's cross and the Pope setting it on fire and burning it up because people are worshiping the cross more than Jesus. Now, it's 100% the right thing to do. It's very like Taoist, right? Like, almost, right? Like, let it die, let it burn, let us be like water kind of thing. But it is the right thing to do. That and frankly, understandable that people see this bronze serpent. It's a huge story. We've already read it in our readings, that the people got sick. Moses, put up this snake on a cross, on a staff, like, with a cross at the top. And we actually still see that used
I
for
was
like
gonna,
paramedics, right?
yeah, I was gonna ask if it was the same thing.
It is the same thing. This is why you see the cross with the snake on it on ambulances. And yeah. And so this is where they get it from. So they have that around. They have that bronze serpent on that cross around that has managed to survive all that time, all those hundreds and hundreds of years. And Hezekiah destroys it because these people have lost the meaning behind it. They're just making sacrifices to it, worshiping it. You know, they love the iconography, but they don't love what it actually stood for. And it makes me think about it. One of these issues that I have had to confront within myself, and Aaron, you've been a good, healthy part of this journey with me, is I did tend to anyway, get stuck fighting for an ideology as defined by like the origin of that ideology, unwilling to change because language has changed or views have changed or something like that. And so I'm willing, like, I just go down with the ship. But I want to be somebody where if we see in the Bible, it's called the way, right? But if they, and they ended up calling it Christianity, great, that's fine. But if it gets called the way again, am I fine with being like, I'm not really a Christian anymore because the word Christian is so perverse and means something so awful? But like we rebrand into like Jesusist or something like that, right? Like I'm a Jesusite. That like, would I be a part of that positive change, or would I be so stuck in defending what Christianity is or what I want Christianity to be that I refuse to leave the baggage behind? And so I'm held back by a name, by an icon, by a structure, by a flag. And how many of us have these pictures? You know, when you change faiths, if you've been invested in your old faith, it can be tough because you've got pictures everywhere, right? Like you just think like, man, I don't want to leave that behind. Like it feels like destroying that picture that of Jesus and the shepherd. I can't leave that. That's too important to me. That's too good.
Or especially
You know?
when you've got family still in the faith and you're going
Yeah.
to be excommunicated from the family, you know.
I was reading about Robert Louis Stevenson, and so he left the faith and ended up coming back to it later in the fight, later in life. Fantastic early version of like deconstruction before we kind of knew to call it deconstruction, right? But like he lost his faith and was like, "What's the hardest part?" Well, telling the two people that you love and care about more than anything else in the world that you don't share their faith in the more was like, I think he said that was like the worst feeling he's ever had in his life, of being like, I don't believe in it the way that you believe in it anymore. And so he did come back, like obviously on his own terms. It's actually really kind of a cool story, his whole comeback. I was reading that tied to a bunch of different things that I was researching this week, not to this, but it worked out. It works out well for this. But yeah, like that, all those painful, difficult things that you have to do. Destroying the snake with a cross on it, Aaron, I got to be honest with you, I don't know if I could do it. I know it's the right thing to do, but even now, even with the lessons that you've taught me and things that I try to learn and grow and the Taoism and all the stuff that I love and agree with, ooh, that's a tough thing to do. It's like burning Noah's Ark or Jesus' cross or something like that.
I mean, you keep like raising me up in this part of the conversation, but I'm not a master at it by any means. Like, I'm still like, I've disavowed myself from the LP like 30 times at this point. And yet
sure.
A week ago, I was still watching that stupid Karen Ann Harlow's video with LP Alliance, like as though it was still relevant to my life. You know, like, yeah. I've been trying to distance myself from.
I watched it too. Right? I also have left and watched it too. Yeah, it's.
Yeah, I mean,
I think
it's more so traps.
See, I guess I don't beat myself up for that because it's like I am aware. I want to be connected with people, and if people are connected to the LP, I want to be connected with them. It's like a good way to try and like bond with them, right? Like to try and speak what they're speaking and talk what they're talking about, be a part of what they're a part of. And so that way I'm like on their team. But there are things like, to me, and the reason I credit you so much is like, this has a lot to do with like economics, that my view on communism and socialism and capitalism and all that stuff was so ardent, and it was grounded in something. I'm not going to say it wasn't grounded. I wasn't like arbitrarily like what the YouTubers doing. Like just everything I hate is capitalism or everything I hate is communism or something like that. Like there was a principle behind it, but I became so addicted to that principle that I wasn't willing to evolve or change as the way that people's perceptions of those terms have changed. And if people that are socialists are like, well, but I don't want to like ban all religion or whatever, right? Then it's like, oh, I need to let that happen, right? Like I need to allow that to happen, as opposed to me being like, well, then you're not really a socialist, right? Like the founders would tell you you're not a socialist, and in the same way, like I have this beautiful view of like, especially these early capitalists, of like the great things they did and how wonderful they were. But if people want to call what we have capitalism, would I rather die trying to redeem the term? Or would I rather be a part of a solution that overturns this corrupt system? I don't want to have this fight where I'm constantly defending capitalism, the word, because who cares, right? Like, just like who cares? Like, it's a bronze, like the way God sees this pole is a stick with a bronze snake on it that got made 2,000 years ago. Who cares? And that needs to be my view. I don't have it very often. It's hard, but I do need to be like, who cares? Hody, who cares what capitalism actually is? Like, go ahead and use whatever definition is that the person you're talking to. Isn't that literally the definition of language, right? That I am supposed to be able to get ideas and messages across.
Communication rather than,
yeah, communication, right? And so if I'm fighting about what these words mean and just saying you used it wrong, I'm not communicating. I'm just having these stupid fights. And so I think that to me, it's like I need to be willing to be like, you know what, you've invested a lot in this, but don't be afraid to abandon the past. We look at that holding back the church of this. I mean, this is an Old Testament verse, but to make it New Testament, like what we're talking about, like how many of these customs, we're told that in actually a separate verse from this week, but there's these customs that they get stuck on, that they just can't leave behind because they did it in the law of Moses. And it's part of who we are as Jews, as people. Like, it's what makes us us. And God's like, but who cares, right? Like, it's circumcision. It does nothing. Everybody knows it does nothing. Like, stop doing it. Who cares? Like if you want to keep going doing it, I guess fine. But like if they don't want to, that doesn't impact their faith, right? Like it doesn't change anything. And so we need to be willing to be like, I have all this iconography that I like, and I understand why people might relate to it, but am I willing to leave it behind to do the right thing? Yeah. I need to be a gung-ho yes person, to just be like, if this person thinks capitalism is Keynesianism, I'll just go, yeah, let's fight against that. If you want to call it capitalism, great. And then I'll call whatever actual capitalism is coolism or something. I'll rebrand whatever I got to do. The church, God's church, is cool to rebrand. And we see it in the Old Testament. We even see it in the New Testament and the Old Testament. We see it in both. And we need to be able to rebrand too. It's, if something goes bad, we need to not be so glued to these our relics, I guess, right? Artifacts. That's the word I'm looking for. It's like, it starts with an R. I know there's a word. Yeah. Anyway, any thoughts?
Well, yeah, I was going to say earlier you were talking about how people are attached to symbols rather than the ideas that the symbols are supposed to represent. And it reminded me of that old Carlin quote, let's leave symbols for the symbol-minded. Which I thought was I always thought that was super clever.
I've never heard that. That's great.
Yeah.
Symbols for the simple-minded. Yeah, and maybe I'm just one of the simple-minded. I guess it's hard to get away from. It really is. Like I don't want to think myself as like that, but I'll be honest, like not pledging allegiance, this is going to sound so stupid. Not standing for the Star-Spangled Banner and not pledging allegiance were like among the very last dominoes I had to fall for like anarchy. Like, I don't know why. I don't know why, because of course, in hindsight, it's so stupid, but like,
you could have had really positive associations with them from your childhood, you
I
know?
did.
And yeah.
Not could have. I definitely did. I just,
I didn't, so they were fine for me, but I could totally see
Yeah.
how, like, if you had a really great childhood and those were parts of your childhood, you know,
Yeah.
it could be hard to give it up.
It's kind of the Fiddler on the Roof thing,
Mm.
like Tevye, like what is right, what is wrong. It's like, how flexible are you willing to be, to understand right and wrong, to do good, and not just like be so glued into whatever you think the law is, I love Acts and Romans. Like, I love these. I love them because they feel so applicable today. People glued into what is the law versus what is the purpose of the law. Like, we're told about the law of divorce, right? Like, it's like God like let you divorce whoever because you guys were so hard-hearted you wouldn't have accepted him otherwise. But the purpose was always, and then what's funny is people will still take the New Testament law. So Jesus changes it, right? Like, don't just divorce people for no reason, right? Like, you got to have like there's got to be like adultery or something. And so people are like, well, what's okay? So then they'll take that and be like, no divorce ever, even if he's hitting you, right? Like, other churches are like, the guy's beating you. Jesus even tells us the underlying, like, the spirit behind his new philosophy, which is to protect these women. Like, the reason he changes it is because they would divorce these women. They'd be like, you are entitled to nothing. Now you're back out on the streets. I'm trading you in for a younger model. And he's like, no, we need to protect these women. So protecting women is the spirit behind this law. So when people take this new law again, it's the New Testament law, no leaving unless there's adultery. They are intentionally ignoring the spirit of the law, which Jesus explicitly says, right? That they are like, no, we're going to keep them in these bad marriages, bad relationships that are harmful to them, ignoring the fact that the spirit of the reason Jesus gave this new law, if you even want to call it that, but this new directive, was that women need to be kept safe, And so it's funny that we just still don't get it. We don't. I am more. I feel every time that I argue with them, I almost every time visualize the Pharisees, right? Like, it's just, this is the exact argument that they had with the Pharisees. You're just going to ignore this law? And it's like, I'm like Stephen over here. I understand the law. I have the spirit of that law with me. Like, you just want the print and paper. You just want black and white, Yeah.
Yep. That frustration, yeah, I get it.
I mean, I said it this week, and I guess I don't want to bring too much social media into it, but I had this feeling that we're reading this Old Testament, and they are willing to believe that God told Abraham to go kill his own kid. And because God tells you to do it, you should do it. Something that I actually do believe, right? We do what God tells us to do. It's the reason I am still like a pacifist, but I'm a like proportional pacifist. I think if the Holy Spirit tells you to do violence, I've become open to that, right? But they do, and so they're willing to believe that Abraham is like, well, because God said it, I will do it, right? Kill my own kid. But they're not willing to believe that a gay person might have God tell them that they're okay to be gay, right? Like, God might tell you to murder your kid, but there's no way he would tell you that your relationship is okay.
Right.
Like, it just blows my mind. Like, you think that God told somebody to go and commit a genocide,
it's the
or
same.
break all the legs on all these cows, and they were right to do it because God told them to do it. And then there's a person telling you, I've tried to pray the gay away, but God tells me it's okay that I'm gay, and you won't believe them? Like, go ahead, Aaron. You gotta go. I'm out of words.
No, it's the same mentality that will have a guy like traipse around Walmart in a shirt that says something to the effect of, if the bullets start flying, follow behind me, I'll protect you, or something like that. They're like gung ho, like, I'll die for my country, I'll die for what I believe in, but they won't like put on a mask because that's inconvenient. Like, right. They won't save people's lives from a deadly virus, but they'll LARP as like some sort of war hero, like Rambo-esque character. Yeah. Because I think what it is putting on a mask and like protecting people from disease. It's pragmatic, it's practical, but it's not sexy.
Yeah.
And they want to only do the sexy things, like the things that they'll be put on a statue for. You're not going to get put on a statue for wearing a mask.
True.
You know?
Right. Right. That's yeah. Looking both ways before crossing the street isn't
Yeah.
isn't as
It
hot
doesn't
as
it
used to
doesn't
be.
bring you glory.
Right. I'm not using my turn signal, like yeah, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard to reason with them. I think there's that saying that like you can't reason with somebody in a position they didn't reason themselves into.
Yeah.
I don't believe that as an altruism, because I do think sometimes, I know for myself, reason has certainly changed the way I felt about, a lot of things that unreasonable that I didn't reason myself into. But there are certainly some people that are in a cult. They're there for the cult, and that this is the thing that it is, and they can't change. I remember, I can't remember if I've mentioned it here with you before, but have I told you about the Pete Quinones and bringing in Uzi? That story. So Pete Quinones, a white supremacist, Christian nationalist, whatever, talked about COVID, and he was like, oh, all these sheeple, the usual stuff, like wearing their masks, they're so afraid, they're such like little pissants. No joke. Same podcast, by the way, like 1 hour podcast, the same podcast. So like 15 minutes after he's like crapping on all these people who are, might get COVID, don't want COVID to spread. They're like, but so scared to just live their normal lives, whatever. He talked about the Summer of George protests and how every day, this guy works in the middle of like Ohio, by the way, like rural. It's some like backwoods. He brags about it, in fact, often about how rural his place is. He said that he brought an Uzi with him to work every day during the Summer of George protest because he thought like the protesters were going to come in and like kill him. And I'm just like, dude.
Risk assessment, like
right. Right. There's no risk assessment here, right? Like, it was funny. I even support your right to bring an Uzi for whatever reason, like if you really feel the need to defend yourself. But the fact that like the mask was too much, but like the Uzi for the protest, yeah, there's no value system here, right?
It's like people who are terrified to fly on a plane, but then they'll get in their car and drive drunk. Like it.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's
no
the same
risk
thing
whatsoever.
Yeah. Alligator Alcatraz. I have brief thoughts that are probably very predictable about this.
Yeah.
But
are we talking about the Loomer tweet?
We can talk about the Loomer tweet. I certainly brought it up.
I just posted about it like 15, 20 minutes ago. And holy shit.
Why don't we look at now? The funny thing is she posted this on June 30th. She got away with this for a couple days, but people are actually like figuring out what she meant just now. I'll go ahead and let me go ahead and share a screen here. Let's see, present, share screen. Let's do a tab here. So Laura Loomer posted Alligator Lives Matter. The good news is alligators are guaranteed at least 65 million meals if we get started now. So Alligator Alcatraz, of course, is a place in Florida. For those who don't know, it is a location in Florida in which it's a repurposed Air Force base. FEMA, by the way, you remember when all the Republicans were mad that FEMA was doing a bunch of natural disaster. This is like 9 months ago.
This is not. No. Okay, this isn't that.
They were super upset. And to be fair, FEMA it's a government organization, so it's a wasteful organization. But they were spending money on a bunch of projects that were not natural disaster related. Now, to be fair, if we really want to get into the weeds on FEMA also, like by definition, like will handle human health emergencies, and they've been called on in the past to handle other disaster relief. We know them for natural disaster relief, but they do other things. Were they doing some wasteful things? I have no defense of FEMA, of course, but FEMA is setting up a facility. It's going to initially be paid for by Florida taxpayers, and eventually that money will be covered by the FEMA funds from Florida, from what I understand. So I'm sure the conservatives who just 9 months ago were upset about all the natural disaster related things FEMA was doing will be just as pissed now. But they're going to be sending them there. They bragged about how bad these facilities are. They laugh that it doesn't have AC. They laugh about how it floods. When it rains, they laugh about how it smells like it's in the middle of like a swamp, that it smells bad. They laugh about how hot it is with all the people that are in these compact cages, that the body heat, in addition to Florida's natural heat, makes things almost unbearable. They laugh about transportation, that getting them there is easy, getting them out will be next to impossible. They bragged about all of this, and this is going to be a facility where they have illegal immigrants. They're calling it Alligator Alcatraz. They are also selling merchandise, calling it Alligator Alcatraz. And when I say they, I am talking about the state. This is not like some wackadoo group of Republicans. Like, this is the actual, like, this is the state. This is the government, which is funded by taxpayers. So taxpayer-funded merch for Alligator Alcatraz. Anyhow, that's the history. What's going on here? When she says 65 million meals, right? So killing 65 million people to eat, right? So there are only between 11 and 13 million illegal immigrants in the United States. So she's talking about killing 52 plus million legal citizens and feeding them to the alligators. And 65 million is about the population of I'm guessing what happened is she looked up the approximate population of Latinos within this country. It's about 65 million. And so she's just advocating for a genocide. Now, Aaron, I've not seen, I will now go ahead and look up what you said about it. But that's about my feelings about it, is she's talking about a genocide. Did you share it on X? Is that the place to look for it for you?
No, I'm never on Twitter anymore.
Oh, okay.
No, I mean, I'm referencing the same tweet that you just read.
Okay.
But I mean, people jumped on that immediately and noted that.
Is it your penis Starview Valley?
No, just under that.
Just under that. Oh, okay. Got it.
Yeah, no, just under that. Did you put that on stream?
No.
Okay,
I can. Certainly, I'm not above it.
Please don't.
Yeah. There aren't 65 million immigrants in the country, but there are 65 million Latinos. This was never about immigrants. This is about white nationalism. Yeah. So I've said about everything I need to say about it. Aaron, what are your thoughts about this? Oh, you've got some other posts here. The entire Latino population of the United States is 65 million. She means all of us. There's only 15 million undocumented immigrants. There's 45 million, including legal and illegal. There's 65 million Hispanic people. So she's not just talking about all immigrants. She's not just talking about all illegal immigrants. She has. They are signaling that they want to exterminate 20% of the humans in America right now. Yeah, that's about 20% of the country. That's about 1 in 5. Like, bad, Aaron, bad. So, your thoughts?
I wish I had a better thought than bad. But that's really all it is. It's like there's no reckoning with this in any way other than opposition. Like you can't compromise with this. You can't seek a middle ground or any. No, there's no. It's just opposition, and if that opposition is nonviolent, well, that's great. But if it comes to it, I mean, I made a post 3 years ago that it came up in my Facebook memories, that basically said, it was right after Roe, and Roe was repealed. And it was about the fact that Clarence Thomas signaled at the time that he was open to getting rid of Lawrence v. Texas, which is the is it Lawrence? I don't remember. It's something v. Texas.
I think it's Lawrence.
Yeah.
The Lawrence. I'll look it up. But yeah, go ahead.
Basically saying that like the sodomy laws that are on the books still in Texas, like they're still on the books. They're just waiting to reinforce those. Like, I mean, the federal law prevents them from doing that right now. But Clarence Thomas signaled that the court might tackle that in sometime in the future. And Texas never repealed those laws. So as soon as they become enforceable again, Ken Paxton, who is our attorney general in Texas, said that he would be absolutely willing to enforce those laws the moment they can come back into effect.
Wow.
And
wow, that's shocking.
And yeah, I mean, like, if we're to the point now where we go back as a country to enforcing sodomy laws, like what's next? Like breaking up people's marriages because they are misogynists or whatever the word is. Yeah, I only know the word of miscegenation. I don't know the like conjugated, like. But you know what I'm saying. Like my wife is Asian. I'm white. Are we gonna break up my marriage because I'm a race traitor? Like, I mean, is this where we're going as a country? Like, uh, yeah, it's fucked.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about it, I think before you came on the stream, but like for some people, like the cruelty is the point. Like it's just that their value is hurting another person, and I can try to reason with just about anybody here, but like there's a certain point. I hate to give Hoppe some credit here, but we are not arguing facts. It's ethics. We both agree that this is going to hurt X amount of families. I just see that as a bad thing, and they see it as a good thing, And it's like, well, I guess so. And we're just arguing about ethics, aren't we? And like, yeah, that's indeed what's going on, and like our ethical system. And this is why I have largely left the political sphere, and I'm proud of myself for not going back. Since the Chase campaign. I'm aware that's not a long time, but I have certainly had many, many, many people trying to get me involved in politics again, and I won't. I don't see the point when people are so. We need Christianity for what Christianity is. We need Jesus back. I need this culture healed. I need goodness and love back. I need loving our neighbors back. None of that, nothing in politics is going to change until all that gets fixed. That's all there is to it.
We haven't talked about him yet, and we don't really have time because it's already over anyway. But at some point, probably maybe next week, we need to talk about Mamdani.
Interesting. Yeah.
Because
I don't have strong feelings, but I have opinions, I guess. I have insight, but I don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's talking about people who genuinely want Christian values, like Christianity as we would define Christianity. It's funny that like the number one person I can think of in the country right now that's promoting Christian values is a Muslim. Like, yeah, I'm very much so in the pro Mamdani camp.
Nice.
Yeah.
I have some issues, obviously, with what I've seen, but I will say this:
there's things
usually,
like he signaled that he supports gun control.
Of course.
He's talked about public grocery stores, which is a concept that I think is probably questionable at best. But like, it's a handful of issues that I'm like, I could quibble with, like his idea of gun control is not radical.
Right.
It's very much in the mainstream of gun control is bad policy overall, but it's not like it's particularly heinous gun control, proposals and everything like that. Like, I mean, it's not terrible. And there's so much more that's beneficial. And it's funny to hear Trump like call him, he's not just a socialist, he's a communist. And Mamdani is advocating for something like having a new mother basket available to all new moms that covers like a month of essentials for the baby and everything like that.
Yeah.
Whereas Trump is like wanting to do $1,000 bank account for all new kids. So like Mamdani's example is actually less quote unquote communist according to the way that they define communism than Trump's, but Trump is out here calling him a communist and trying to like get him denaturalized so he can be deported.
Yeah. Well, like you said, we probably shouldn't get into it too much. I'd love to do a deeper dive onto this. I will say, so he said we need to ban all guns. This was back in 2022. I don't know what his position is on it now.
Yeah.
But I will say now this was done to like own him, but there's an irony about calling him a communist.
Yeah.
When Karl Marx says, under no pretext should arms and ammunition be surrendered. Any attempt to disarm the workers must be frustrated by force if necessary. So it's funny because if you want to talk about the people doing actual Marxism and look at like border control and such, well, Republican Party. I think you're kind of dropping the ball as far as who's doing the real communism that you really hate. But that, and even that's complicated. I know Marx, where we get that is like one thing that he wrote. He did have a policy, I guess. He didn't want, Irish taking people's jobs or whatever. But even then he wasn't like, let's build a wall for him. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. But like, I think it's ironic because like we've gotten to the point where they're like dunking on him for like eating rice with his hands.
Mm-hmm.
And to me,
that's a cultural thing.
Right. The fact that that's, absolutely. I learned to make rice. It was Indian or whatever, and they totally ate it with their hands. And
my wife is Filipina, and she eats rice with her hands all the time.
Yeah, I got this fantastic. It was lamb and rice.
A fork, and she eats it with her hands, and we just like don't understand each other in that.
Sure. But like to me, the fact that this is an issue on like day 3 of us like trying to scorch him, I was like, oh, so we're out of ammo at this point. Yeah. Like we've run, the well is run dry.
Well, they called him a Muslim like 800,000 times. So
Yeah. Well, is he a Muslim?
I don't even know. I think he is, but
they've said it so much. I just assumed it was true, but that's probably a bad assumption for me to make.
What religion is Mamdani? He speaks Hindi fluently, so he could very well be, Sikh or something like that. I don't know.
Dude, that would be awesome if he was Sikh. That is a religion. If I left Christianity, that I would probably do.
I mean, I don't know because I don't really care. It's not really relevant to his politics at all. But
dude, I cannot find the guy's religion. Oh my gosh, I do. The top 4 results on Google are all from news sources that have the Star of David in the icon. So
that's you're gonna get accurate information.
I know I'm probably not gonna get there. I think so this is from that's Al Jazeera. It says he's Muslim.
I'm just gonna Wikipedia it.
I tried to Wikipedia, I could not find it. That was the first source I went to. Regardless, we're going. You know what? That's something I should save for next week anyway.
Yeah. Let's save it for next week.
Yeah, like again, the fact that I'm struggling to find it, like, the anti-Muslim stuff, I'll have to save it for next week. There is so much to say. All right. I'm gonna relax for next week. We'll talk with Donnie. I'll be a little more educated on it by then. Aaron, thanks for joining us. I appreciate you joining in. I know that timing isn't always the most convenient.
Wikipedia says he's Shia Muslim. So.
Oh, okay. Shia Muslim. Great. Okay. There we go. A real answer. Appreciate it. All right. So at least the Republicans got that one right. Now their inferences from it are completely wrong. But this is again, lots of things I have to say about people of other faiths. Remind me about the parables, sheep and the goats, if I don't bring it up next week, Aaron. I'm sure that I will. But yeah. All right, guys. Thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate all the viewers that we got. Appreciate you always sticking around, viewing all 2 hours. It really means a lot. Everybody have an enjoyable rest of the week. We are halfway done with the year, by the way, which means we are halfway done with the Bible. July 2nd, halfway done with the year. So back half of the Bible to gum. I'm very excited about that. Very excited about getting through this year, getting through the Bible, and then seeing what else the Love First Christians has on the horizon. So that'll be exciting. Aaron, have a good night, man. I'll talk to you tomorrow for book club. Everybody else, I'll talk to you tomorrow for Bible reading. Bye, everybody.
Bye.